You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Well, hello again, everyone. This is Doug Thorpe, and you're listening to another episode of Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Today, my guest is going to talk to us about something that he has developed called brain glue. And I love the, I don't know what I call it. I love the theme. I love the idea. And I think you're going to enjoy meeting my guest today. His name also is an interesting twist. His name is James Bond. So I have James Bond on my show. James, welcome.
Doug, thank you for having me. Love your podcast. It's one of the best podcasts on business. I love it.
Well, thank you so much. Folks, as we were in the green room, I was tempted. I was curious, and I asked James how often he suffers jokes about his namesake, and he said, "Well, Doug, you're the first this hour." So I think that tells you an idea what he's had to go through. But that aside, James, give us a little bit of a backstory of your professional career, your journey, and how you came up with this idea of brain glue. What is that?
So you ever notice that some products are amazing and they make a fortune with almost even no effort or money even, and it's other products they're really great products, but they struggle to try to be successful. I discovered why it actually cost no money to figure this out. And then people start becoming massively wealthy as a result of this. In fact, it's so powerful that Jack Canfield, who wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul, he sold 500 million Chicken Soup for the Soul books. He doesn't need me telling him anything. And he has 60 other bestsellers, more than 60 other bestsellers. And he started reading my book and he got pissed off. And I'm like,
revealed his secret?
Yeah, exactly. He said, I started reading your damn book as one of my friends put it on my pile of books to check out. And I got pissed off. And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. Why?" He said, "Yeah, I couldn't put the damn thing down." So they go, "I'm sorry. Could I get that as a quote?" Apologize. But he's amazing in how successful he is. And yet he's required everyone in his company to read it and apply it because it's so powerful. Because one of the things he discovered in reading it was the book that he sold 100 million Chicken Soup for the Soul book, and then 400 million of the other Chicken Soup for the teenage soul, Chicken Soup for the cancer survivor soul, etc. So 500 million books plus 60 other bestsellers. And he realized that the 60 other bestsellers didn't use the tool that he used in his book, Chicken Soup for the Soul. I have to remember it. There's so many things. Because, he's telling me that the book he wrote this book and he was going to call it 101 Motivational Stories That Will Change Your Life. But then he's thinking that's kind of logical. And he realized something that's profound for all of us, and that is emotion sells more than logic. And he said, it's not an emotional title, 101, motivational stories that will change your life. And so it took him about a month, and he woke up in the middle of the night one night, he was telling me, and then he said, chicken soup makes you feel good, makes you feel better when you're feeling really crappy. Maybe I should call my book Chicken Soup for the Spirit. Doesn't quite work, but I think I kind of like it. He said then it took a weekend of sleepless nights, and he went S-O-U-P, soup, S-O-U-L, soul. It's alliteration, repetition of sound. Chicken Soup for the Soul. That works. And suddenly when he had that title, he was excited. And the title helped his book stand out from everybody else's books and took off like gangbusters, and then he sold 500 million books. And he's telling me that he didn't really apply these tools, chicken soup. It's not, you don't open the book and go, oh, look, there's chicken soup inside the book. Hey, let's eat lunch. It's not that. It's a metaphor. It's like chicken soup, okay? It makes you feel good like chicken soup makes you feel good. And he started, and then for the soul, S-O-U-P, S-O-U-L, that's alliteration, repetition of sound. And suddenly I started realizing, how many products use, blockbuster products use alliteration. Coca-Cola, Best Buy, PayPal, TikTok. You think if TikTok was called the Chinese social media platform, it will be as successful as TikTok? No. I have a son and 3 daughters, and they're in their 30s and 40s. But our youngest daughter said, she loves TikTok. And I said, yeah, it's a Chinese social media platform. She said, no, it's not. I said, yeah, it is. I said, yeah, no, it isn't. She did some research and came back and said, oh, you're right, it is. It's Chinese. But so I discovered these patterns. And when you understand these certain patterns, you start to realize why certain products are blockbusters and other products, even though they might be really good, are not. And so I'm originally from Montreal. I live in Southern California now. It's a little warmer, a little flamier, but a little warmer. But in Montreal, I worked my way up. I had an advertising agency, and I won major clients like Kraft Foods, Timex Watches, Avon Cosmetics, Seagram's, their world headquarters is in Montreal. And I had an opportunity to win the anti-drug campaign in America. So I came up with powerful, logical reasons why you should not do drugs. And I lost. And who did I lose to? A guy that had the commercial that had a guy holding an egg saying, this is your brain, then cracking the shell and dropping the egg into a sizzling frying pan. This is your brain on drugs. Any questions? And when I saw that, 2 things happened. The first one was I recognized this is infinitely more powerful than my ad. Okay, infinitely more powerful. This is really amazing. But the second thing I realized is this is emotional selling, not logical. And I don't know how to do emotional selling. They don't teach it in school, and there's virtually no books on it or anything else that talks about how to do emotional selling. Now, I remember when I first started in business, I hated selling. I got in business with one of my brothers, and he was great, although family and business doesn't always mix. But I love my brother. But I realized, when we finally broke up, I had to run my advertising business, and I didn't love selling. And I was in a workshop with Zig Ziglar workshop with my wife, and he said this thing that blew my mind, and it just stayed with me. And I started realizing this. And he said, selling is nothing more than a transference of passion. If you saw a movie that you love, nobody has to teach you how to sell it. You go, oh man, I just saw Hidden Figures. You got to see this movie. The 3 black women who are in NASA, and it's just an amazing movie. Nobody has to teach you how to sell it. You're transferring your passion. And yet in school, we kind of learn this, is you sell with logic. But that's not, what are the logical reasons why this is good and this is bad? But people buy for emotional reasons. Well, after about 10 years, I moved with my family to Southern California, and I met John Gray. And John Gray is an author who wrote a book called Men, Women, and Relationships. And he was telling me this. He was so frustrated that people would read the book and tell him, this is the most profound relationship book I've ever read. It's helped me strengthen my relationship with my wife or my husband or my boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever else. This is such a good book. But almost nobody was buying it. And yet when people read it, it would take off. And so he got this crazy idea to change the title of the book to Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And the rest, as they say, is history. In fact, I have a mistake in my book, because in my book I talk about it and I say he sold 10 million books. No, I know Steve Harrison, who helped him from a marketing standpoint. He said, no, we're at 50 million books sold. He went from 20,000 to 50 million books sold because of the title. Really? And then when I got home, I created this box called a passion box. And I would start putting, every time I saw an ad that was emotional, or an article that was emotional, or a quote that was emotional, like John F. Kennedy said, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Whoa, what's that? It took me a while to learn that this is something called chiasmus, which is a flip, all for one and one for all, civil rights activist Malcolm X said, we didn't land on Plymouth Rock, the rock landed on us. He also said, when you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. Flip, and I started realizing there are patterns. I dumped my passion box on my bed, and I started realizing there are actual patterns. When I started putting together the patterns, and I worked as a consultant, so it helped because I got to practice on clients in lots of different companies. Sales started exploding like gangbusters when people started applying this. And I'll give you some examples, okay? So Cary Smith started he started a manufacturing company. He started making some money, so he bought a friend's company that sold fans. Okay, and he called them HVLS fans, which is high volume, low speed fans. Okay, and they were really big fans that you put in a farm and a barn. If you have horses or cows, you're not going to put air conditioning in. You're going to put a big fan. Some big warehouses, you might not put air conditioning in. You put a big fan. So they were really big fans. They're called HVLS fans. Man, he was selling a little bit. One day he was talking to a friend, and a friend said, "Well, I don't get what's so great about your fans." He said, "Well, these are big ass fans." He said, "Big ass fans? Yeah. Oh, why didn't you tell everybody that? What's this HVLS garbage?" Because HVLS is logic, is big ass fans is emotion. Okay. He said, huh. So first he ran an ad for big ass fans, calling them big ass fans, and sales exploded. He went, whoa, maybe I should change the name of the company. He changed the name of the company to Big Ass Fans. He has a great logo of a donkey, so an ass with his butt facing you and his head off in the distance turned towards us, Big Ass Fans is his logo. After 15 years, he was able to sell his company, get this, for $500 million. And in fact, one of the things he did, which is interesting, was when Big Ass Fans took off like crazy, he started adding other products. And then he realized, wait a second, these other products are distracting me from focusing on the fans.
Yeah.
So he stopped selling everything else and just focused on Big Ass Fans, all the different types and sizes and stuff like that. And then he just made a fortune from it. And it's just when you start to understand the patterns and people start applying the patterns, it takes off like gangbusters. They have this guy, Brad Schoenfeld, who's one of America's top fitness coaches. Okay. So if you're a fitness coach, what would you say? Joe Johnson Fitness, or Mary Johnson, exercise, whatever else it is. His website is lookgreatnaked.com. Okay. It's a lot easier to remember than other people's. But he's the number one. He's considered the number one fitness coach in America. He does like some of the top people in the country, in the world, actually. But so when you start to understand these patterns and you start applying these patterns, it takes off like gangbusters. I know this guy, sorry, I'm blabbing away, but I know just this one thing. I know this guy named David Baer, and he and his partner have a company that helps people who are advertisers to make more money. Okay. It's a really good company, but I can't remember for the life of me the name of his company. And so I'm telling him, we're talking about brain glue. So I said, well, there's a trigger word, and ass is a trigger word, and naked is a trigger word. There are lots of these trigger words. And when you hear this, like Warren Buffett says, only when the tide goes out do you discover who's been swimming naked. What he's basically saying is only when times get tough do you realize who's competent and capable and who's not. But by using that phrase, it became powerful. So I said, David Baer, I got the perfect name for your company, Bare Naked Advertising. His partner goes, yeah. And he's going, well, I don't know if I want the word naked next to my name. He said, come on. So he never changed it. I think he should have, because everyone would remember Bare Naked Advertising. But yeah, great. When you start applying it, people start laughing, and they start going like, whoa. And I'll go through this, but I'll name some of the products that people have.
If I can jump in here, I think of an example, and I've actually had the owner of this company on my show. There's a gentleman named Levi Torres that runs a plumbing company in Denver called High Five Plumbing. And you say to yourself, what the heck does High Five have to do with plumbing? Okay, you start thinking about it a minute. Well, we're in Denver, a mile high city, high, maybe that's it. No, that's not it at all. His shtick is when you call and say, I need a plumber to come fix a leak, his techs show up. Of course, the truck is papered with the High Five, and his logo is a hand with a 5 in the middle, boom, High Five. His shtick is when the deal's over, the tech says to the homeowner, are you satisfied with my work today? And the homeowner says, yeah, I thought you did a good job. He said, would you mind stepping out and let's shoot a selfie of us doing a high five in your front yard?
That's fabulous.
And they do that. And what most people don't know is that number one, internally, he runs a contest to instill his techs to do the right thing and get the work done well so that they can get that picture, because he's got a contest every week. The tech who gets the most pictures, wins the prize. So he's got an incentive program internally to make this happen. And for all techs, it's quickly obvious, well, if I don't do a good job, the homeowner's never going to do that with me. So I better do my stuff and do it well. And, and it goes on from there. And he now, again, this is a plumbing company, but he's created a clothing line, caps, T-shirts, ball jerseys. The other thing he does is a little bit of a shtick. His techs wear jerseys that look like baseball jerseys. They're not work shirts. I mean, they are work shirts, but they're not your classic work shirt. It looks like a baseball team jersey, and it's got the logo on it and everything. But that has caught fire, and people want to buy the jerseys and the T-shirts and the caps and everything. And what he's done, he's leveraged that. Every dime of the clothing sales goes to nonprofits. And so, he's done a whole lot of emotional packing in his offering. He's not just chucking a truck showing up to fix your toilet,
Well, so I'm sitting, that's why these things, we need to grab attention and not just put logic, Joe's Plumbing or something like that. I mean, yeah, everybody's got that, but it doesn't stand out from the crowd. It's one of the things that we have to recognize is people's minds are overwhelmed with so much advertising and ideas, and now your cell phone is in, and the internet and whatever else, which is good, but people are overwhelmed with all the stuff that they have. So you need to find a way to stand out from the crowd. And it turns out there are psychological ways to do that, as you were talking about with your plumber. I'm sitting in a barber shop, and the barber wants to create a franchise of this type of barbershop. Okay, great. He says, can you help me come up with a name? So I'm sitting there with all these other people, and I'm getting my hair cut. And I know a bunch of tools. One of them is alliteration, repetition of sound. Best Buy, buh, buh. Biden's Build Back Better, buh, buh, buh. Trump's Make America Great Again, good, good, which came from Reagan. But when you understand the power of some of the tools like alliteration, it really helps. So I'm sitting there thinking, okay, well, I'm getting a barber shop. Okay, buh, buh, buh. Okay, what else works? Haircut. Oh, why don't you call it Haircut Heroes? And he goes, oh, that's a cool name. And the Haircut Heroes, is a name. Now he visualized, separate from the name of the barbershop he had now, it would be really cool to call it the Haircut Heroes. He puts a big sign up and a poster in front of his building, and suddenly people are stopping by and actually coming in to buy the product, to get haircuts. It's like, really? I mean, it works. It's amazing that if you can grab attention, it makes you stand out from the crowd. Let me give you this story of this. There's a mom and son, employees. They're not entrepreneurs, but they're watching Shark Tank and they're in love with Shark Tank. And the whole concept of Shark Tank is really good because, it motivates a lot of people to realize, hey, I can be an entrepreneur, or I can make a side hustle, make some extra money, being in business for myself. So they're going like, wouldn't it be great if we can actually invent a product and get on Shark Tank? We'd become millionaires. Oh, yeah, Okay, so that's great. So they're thinking, it took about a month, and the mom had a problem. She was constipated. And so she was talking to a doctor, and her doctor told her, when you're on the toilet, if you could raise your feet 6 to 8 inches off the floor, this already. Okay?
I know where you're going.
Okay. But if you can raise your feet 6 to 8 inches off the floor, it changes the shape of your body, and it makes it easier going to the bathroom when you're constipated. Oh, okay. So she did that, and it worked. And so after about a month of doing this, she said, why don't we create a little stool, a toilet stool that wraps around the toilet, and you can slide it out and put your feet on it when you're on the toilet. And I went, oh, that's a great idea. So they found a manufacturer, because we're lucky that today you go on the internet, you can find manufacturers. And they got a reasonable price. They have to build a mold. And then from that point forward, it costs about $4 or $5 per stool. Well, it wasn't very much. They could sell it for $20. They could make a fortune. But we need a good name. So the first name was Toilet Stool. But she didn't like that name. That wouldn't work. My wife said they should have called it the stool, but I don't think that's a good idea. But they start thinking, toilet. What's another word for toilet? Potty. And you're kind of squatting when you're on there. Squatty potty. Let's call it the squatty potty. They had no business experience. Within 2 years, they reached $100 million of sales within 2 years. Okay. I mean, all these people who are how many of us are in business and do we have one product and suddenly we got $100 million within 2 years? No. I mean, now I'm starting getting more successful. But what you want to do is you want to realize, they realized that Squatty Potty, the name, I was in a hospital about 3 months ago. I got heart bypass surgery. Not fun. And so while I'm in a hospital, just as they're prepping me and everything, so the nurse is asking me, what do you do? And I said, I wrote a book called Brain Glue. She said, oh, what's that? And I start telling her about the story of Squatty Potty. And she says, I got to tell you this. She says, I'm a nurse, so I know that you want to raise your feet when you're on the toilet. So I've got a little stool at home that I use like a trash can. I turn it upside down. I use it that way. But I was in a store and I saw Squatty Potty and I loved the name. So I bought the product. I said, you have a stool, but you bought the product anyway, even though you already have something? I said, yeah, the name is so cool. I had to buy the product. Yeah. Like, what?
Yeah.
But that's how selling works. When we're selling, you want a name where people go, whoa, okay.
I remember that episode of Shark Tank. I too was a fan of that show and still am. And I watched that episode when they came on. I looked at my wife and I said, how cool is this? And we bought one, not that we thought we had this passion to need it really badly. And, but we were curious. And so we went down to Bed Bath and Beyond. There's another alliteration.
Yep.
Sadly, they don't exist anymore, I guess, or they've really shrunk back. But
right.
Anyway,
not because of their name, but because of business.
Yeah, other things.
Their business, yeah.
Many other things, yeah. But so it is really interesting. So we've talked about a couple. We've talked about the alliteration. What are some of the other patterns that are covered in your book?
Okay, rhyme. Rhyme is a good one. Famous Amos. Anybody ever hear of Famous Amos cookies? They're delicious. Okay. How about 7-Eleven? Does that rhyme? Reese's Pieces, Slim Jims, Jelly Pooper Scooper. How about Pooper Scooper? Okay. Lego My Ego. The ad for Ego. Okay. I mean, when you give a hoot, don't pollute. I mean, these are powerful. If the glove doesn't fit, you have to acquit. Yeah. Got O.J. Simpson off from almost certain guilty verdict in a murder trial. There were 2 jurors after the trial. And they were asked, like, with all the evidence against O.J., there was so much evidence. How come you let him go free? Well, we knew if the glove don't fit, you must acquit. The glove didn't fit. We had to acquit, rhyme. And we don't realize, but things like that really are powerful. There's one called anchoring. So this is where you take something that already exists and you use it or adapt it slightly to what you're working with. So Procter & Gamble, when they launched dandruff shampoo, they knew the slogan, I can't do it, but with kids, head and shoulders, knees and toes, eyes, ears, mouth and nose. So everybody knows head and shoulders. Why don't we call it head and shoulders? Because it's already in everybody's brain. They have, here's a political one. And so I'm not being political for Republicans or Democrats, not at all. But this applies brain glue. So President Reagan, he was president right after the Vietnam War. And because of that, during the Vietnam War, people hated the whole idea of war and missiles and everything else. And they protested like crazy. So when he became president, the military said to him, well, we'd like to create missiles that can fire out of space. And so we'll call it a missile defense system. But he knew that if we're going to spend some taxpayer money on a missile defense system, he'd probably get all these people fighting him. The missile defense, you want to create wars and everything else. So he said, we need to anchor it with something that people love. Okay. So what's something people love? Well, back then, the movie Star Wars was a blockbuster, had just launched. So he called the missile defense system. So we're launching the Star Wars missile defense system. People went like, yeah, because he anchored the two things together. you know. And so like anchoring is one of those things where you take something that already exists in people's minds, and you tie it together with the product or service you have. You know, Chips Ahoy. Everybody knew Ship Ahoy, so Chips Ahoy worked. There's Franken Foods. They talk about that for some of the foods that aren't very healthy. Um, so I forget what his name is, but he's a famous chef, and he was on the Food Network, and they said, "Well, we want to create a TV show for you that has you, grilling." So he goes, "Oh, cool, because I can make all these grilled foods and everything else. That'll be really cool." So he's thinking about it, and he goes, "Well, grill. What's something that sounds like grill? Girl. So Boy Meets Girl. Oh, Boy Meets Grill." He came up with the show Boy Meets Grill and became massively famous as a result of that. So that's anchoring is one of those. How about this one? You can't hug a child with nuclear arms. Those anti-nuclear arms people, okay? So they're going nuclear arms. What do you do with your arms? Well, you hug a child. Well, you can't hug a child with nuclear arms. They anchor those two things together in something you have, this phrase that really grabs attention. But yeah, so that's one. Anchoring is one. Chiasmus is a really good one. So it's opposites. So all for one and one for all. That's a flip, okay? In California and Western United States, they have In-N-Out burgers, okay? In-N-Out. Well, actually, they didn't have a lot of money to compete with McDonald's and Burger King and Wendy's and all that stuff, but they didn't have a lot of money to spend on an indoor restaurant, but they could have a drive-through restaurant. And they're massively wealthy now. But so they're thinking, people are going to drive through. Why don't we call it in and out? They didn't realize it. A lot of people don't realize this, but they're applying chiasmus. It's an opposite, and it grabs attention. In-N-Out burgers, I remember driving, and In-N-Out also means sex for a lot of people. I remember driving past an In-N-Out with my wife. We're going to a McDonald's. And I go, look, In-N-Out burger. In-N-Out burger? In-N-Out? Let's check it out. We checked that. You have to have good product. This is one of the things. Brain glue, you still have to have a good product, but how many people have a good product and yet they still struggle? And I'm amazed how many people and companies I've worked with where we've changed the name, or they've read the book and given me feedback on this, and they change the name of their company or their business, and suddenly sales skyrocketed. Jomax Technologies. A lot of people don't know Jomax Technologies, but Jomax Technologies was a website building company. People loved the company when they would sign up for it, but very few people were doing that. So then he thought, well, I need to come up with a better name. And so a cool name would have alliteration, a repetition of sound. So why don't we call it Big Daddy, Big Daddy? But then he checked it out and Big Daddy was taken. So he said, well, how about GoDaddy? Let's call it GoDaddy. The rest, as they say, is history. GoDaddy shot through because Jomax Technologies, what the hell is that? He lives in, I think, Arizona, and it's the street he was on called Jomax Boulevard. So they called it Jomax Technologies. But by changing the name, suddenly sales exploded. Now, how about this one? How would you like to invent a product, your biggest competitor steals it from you, and they make a fortune while you starve to death? Wouldn't that be fun? Yeah.
That's happened a few times. Yeah.
Okay. So Post Cereals is competing with Kellogg's. And so he decides, instead of just making cereal, let's make another type of product. So they came up with this little cake that fits inside that has, jam in the middle of it, like strawberry, blueberry, raspberry. And you put it in a toaster. When it comes up, you have this nice, little cake that you could eat. And why don't we call it, I'll think of the name in a second, but it's a stupid name. I can't even remember the name. Okay. And he starts 3 months before he launched the product. Sorry, now it's driving me nuts. I have to remember the name. But 3 months before he launched the product, he advertised, he promoted it to media, and media said, wow, look at this new product they're creating, Country Squares. It goes in a toaster, it comes out, and you get this cool cake, and it's called Country Squares. And so the head of Kellogg's looked at it and said, this is amazing. Guys, come here. We need to invent. I need you guys have to figure out how to make that product. We're going to invent that product, but we need a better name. So they used two tools. The first tool is it pops out of the toaster. So pop, it's a sense of elevation where you're taking the sound or another sense. It smells like teen, in and out, well, it smells like Teen Spirit. Okay. What does Teen Spirit smell like, the song? But anyway, so pop. And then back then, Andy Warhol was famous and he was known as a pop artist, pop art. And so pop art, pop tart, which is anchoring, you're taking something that's already in people's minds. Why don't we call it Pop Tarts? And of course, they launched it a week before Country Squares were launched because they advertised when they're launching it. Sales exploded for Pop Tarts. And nobody bought Country Squares. In fact, they exploded so much that Kellogg's ran out of Pop Tarts, and they ran ads apologizing, saying, "We're so sorry. Just hold on for a couple of days, and we'll have more Pop Tarts." We're surprised how many people love the Pop Tarts. Nobody bought Country Squares. Pop Tarts within 5 months stopped selling. I mean, Country Squares stopped selling Country Squares, even though they invented the product. Pop Tarts. I was reading an article that last year they had over 3 billion Pop-Tarts sold, okay? Because of the name, because the name, we need to wake up the brain. So people go, oh, oh, that's interesting. They have this woman.
Let's kind of get to a bottom line here, James. So if I'm one of those business owners and I'm sitting here going, nobody's getting my name and I don't get a lot of rings on the phone or cash on the web, what's the process for trying to go through some of this renaming? Is there a
Yes.
a methodology to employ? And
Absolutely. So men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Some of these things use a metaphor. So they have this guy, Paul Tran, who invented an electric razor for man's private areas. I don't want to get too much into this, okay? I never bought one. If I did, I wouldn't share it with my friends. Let's start there, okay? But he was thinking, I don't want to offend people with a name, but I want to make it obvious what the product does. So what's it like? It's like a lawnmower. Why don't I call it the lawnmower? I even changed the name of his company to Manscaped. You can landscape a man with a lawnmower, okay? So, and sales exploded. I'm in Bed Bath & Beyond, which I think I don't know, but anyway, I was in it with my wife, and they had a big poster, and it said the lawnmower, and then had an arrow pointing to the electric razor. And underneath it had small text describing what it is. And I'm like, the lawnmower? What? That's a lawnmower? And I went up there. There were 2 other guys that are there too. We walked up and we're all reading the text. Oh, it's an electric razor for men's private areas. Oh, interesting. And it's called the lawnmower. But it woke us up, got our attention. If I could see, if I bought one, I'd call my friend Joe and say, hey, Joe, guess what I just bought? What, the lawnmower? Oh, you have to mow your lawn? No, it's for men's private areas. He started laughing. He told his wife, hey, Mary, guess what James just bought? What, the lawnmower? Why? He has to mow his lawn? No, it's for his private area. She started laughing and they'd share it. So they would take off virally. So the first thing you want to do is come up with a metaphor. Be as crazy as possible. My product, service, whatever you're trying to sell is just like, my book is so good, it grabs your attention like a naked man running through your backyard. If you had a naked man running through your backyard, would that grab your attention? That's what my book, so you see. So come up with the craziest idea first because you want to brainstorm. So come up with a metaphor first. The second thing you want to come up with is alliteration, a repetition of sounds. What's the name of your product, service, or idea? Okay? And then buh, 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 muh, 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 whatever else it is, repeat sounds and see if that works. I had for the haircut heroes. Oh, okay. That could work. Okay. Haircut hijacking. I don't know if that would work, but anyway, I love Lucy. Okay. They came up with Lucy. We want the Lucy name in it, but what are other words that have L? Lucky. Oh, we can call it Lucky Lucy. Okay. How about love? Oh, love. I love Lucy. Okay. We don't realize it, but that's alliteration, a repetition of sound. We don't realize it, but our brain realizes it. So alliteration would be the second thing you come up with. Metaphor, then alliteration. And then the third one would be rhyme. I say my book shows you how to light the fire of desire in your buyer. Okay, So when you play with things like that, and because we have, AI, Chat GPT and Gemini on Google and stuff like that, then we can actually play it. Say, what are words that rhyme with haircut? What, and what are alliteration terms that work with the word haircut? Or whatever your business is, or lawnmower or whatever else. When you go through these three tools, it gives you an opportunity to start recognizing things that could really help you. Oh, get the book. The book will really help you. It has 14 of these, but these three are really a good place to start. Is what's a good metaphor for what it is that your product does? What are some words, alliteration, words that have the same sound? And then rhyme. What's something that rhymes with what it is that you're trying to promote? When you take those three, it gives you it opens the door for you to start understanding, wow, this is a really cool name. And cool names make the big difference.
Love it. Well, James, I feel like we could go on forever, but I think we're about up on time for today. I really, really appreciate you sharing this. I think, I think of so many businesses, and even in my own business life, I've had trouble trying to figure out, and I've named things, and then only to have people tell me, "Ugh, that stinks. That's terrible," But and I'm not going to digress and go into some of them, but the point being is it is difficult to find that descriptor name that really can help perpetuate and promote your product. We have a meh kind of name, and then we spend a lot of money and time and effort trying to sell around that name, and as you say, ultimately go nowhere with it. And like Country Squares, that's, maybe on paper that sounded like a neat idea, but, didn't inspire anybody. So anyway, thank you so much. Tell people the best way to get a hold of you if they are interested in talking more.
Well, the easiest way is if you go to yesbrainglue.com, it will actually give you lots of information on that and me. And, I'm jbond at fasterbuyer.com. So we're showing you how to get faster. But yeah, nice. Yes, Brain Glue is a good place to start. I think people are really floored by what's on there.
I appreciate it. Well, again, one last time, thanks so much for sitting in. We really appreciate your time and your brain for putting all this together.
Oh, Doug, thank you. This podcast rocks. If anybody's in business and they don't listen to your podcast on a regular basis, they're crazy, because I love your podcast.
Well, thank you. I may take a detour for just a quick minute. I'll tell you a story. The name of this show, Leadership Powered by Common Sense, I guess that's an anchor idea, right? Common sense and bringing it in. I didn't know that when I put it together, and I've told the story that in my early days when I was standing up my company, I just loved that tagline, and I was interviewing a marketing agency to work with me. We were going over, classic question: what do you have so far? What are you thinking? Da 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 da. And I said, leadership powered by common sense, and they said, oh God, no, you've got to kill that. And I said, no, I think I'm going to kill you. This
exactly.
You're not going to be my marketing guy.
That's right.
And
no, they didn't get it. No, it's you just, when you see the name, when I saw the name, it just floored me. And I started watching your podcast, because I didn't back then, but I started watching some of your podcasts and I went, oh, I want to be on this, because I think it would be valuable, but also I just love, because you're so, it's common sense, and I think the biggest thing we want is leadership. We want to understand, like, how do we develop, how do we, don't just be copying everybody else. You want to change the world, make things better, change your family, change your life. You want to, right. And that comes from leadership. Leadership is not copying everybody else. I mean, sometimes you will copy somebody else because you're going to say that's ideal, but what you're doing is you're choosing and deciding, does this make sense? And I think leadership, this whole concept is just so valuable.
Yeah, well, and I totally agree with you. And my passion for doing it is that as I go around, and I've had wonderful opportunities to work with some of the Fortune 100 companies, And what I find inevitably, the leaders at the top of the house in those businesses are overwhelmed with the complexity of what the business does and how things get done. And they almost get this paralysis of being able to make the next leadership decision because they're getting flooded with data and other information, and various stakeholder constituencies are weighing in, and it goes on and on and on. So I always encourage them, well, what's the common sense? You say you're here, let's call that point A. You want to go there, that's point B. What do we know about the fastest way to get somewhere? Straight line. What's the straight line from A to B?
Well, you're hitting on something that's really valuable. So people think, well, let's look at the most successful company and let's do what they're doing. But Coca-Cola versus Pepsi is a good example, because Pepsi went, okay, they're in all these restaurants, let's get in restaurants. Well, the restaurants had Coke and they didn't want Pepsi. So they said, oh, that's not going to work. Why don't we buy restaurants, okay? And then we can put it in, we'll buy franchises. They started buying franchises, and suddenly they were totally different because they recognized, we had to be leaders, and a leader is going to use common sense. They're not going to just say, well, let's do what he's doing, let's do what she's doing, because that often doesn't work. You need to be a leader and say, what's the common sense about this? If we can't be in restaurants because they're not going to let us in a restaurant, why don't we buy a restaurant and then we'll start putting it in there, buy a chain and do it that way? I mean, it's different for every industry and every book. I could say a book, well, here's a really fantastic book, and I have a book that's a similar title, and I'll not be successful. And the reason is because, no, you need to wake up the brain. You need to be unique. And, and that's why leadership is just such an important thing. School teaches us to, here's the rule, okay? Tell Steve Jobs that, okay? Well, he passed away. And he said he invented stuff. Here's a $500 phone back when phones cost $20 and $30. There's a $500 phone. Who's going to buy a $500 phone? Man, they stood in line because it was changing the world,
Right. That's right.
So, yeah.
Well, very good, Steve. And thank you for hanging with me and making this happen. And on that, folks, we're going to bring this to a wrap. I do want to remind you, we always have the link information in our show notes if you need to check out the references that Steve cited. And also want to encourage you to hop over to my website at dougthorpe.com. I've got a lot of other coaching tips, resources, and articles you can lean into and look at. But for now, go out there, make it a great day.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.